As we switch gear this morning from our news, our first guest is with us here in studio this morning, Mr. Kwesi Vignes, no stranger, of course, to all of us here in Tobago. Welcome, Mr. Vignes.
Thank you. Good morning to all of your viewers. Natalie, thank you for welcoming me. Actually, this is the first time I'm on this show, so...
Really?
Yes.
All right,
so
well,
it's
a
really
special welcome to you this morning.
Thank you so much. It's
All
really
right.
a pleasure to be here.
So this morning we're having a chat about, well, you are here as former secretary in one of our divisions. Now, you know, we change names all the time. So currently the division is Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development. But when you sat there, what was its name?
Oh, it was the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment. There was a strong focus on the marriage between infrastructural development and environmental preservation and sustainability.
Right. And I know you are here, of course, to address one of the concerns that's getting a lot of airplay in terms of the Friendship Estate, right? Of course, we would have heard from various persons. We would have heard from the Secretary, Mr. James. We would have heard from Mr. Ansel Dennis. And a lot of people would have their opinions,
Yes.
etc. Now, you are here this morning to give us a perspective. People may argue who's telling the truth, but everybody should have a voice.
Yes.
So I would start, you know, that road is being constructed, and I want to start off where explain to us in terms of what were the plans, because I understand that it would have been when the PNM was in power, what would have been planned for that area. So maybe you could start us off there.
All right. Thanks so much, Natalie. And you know, I really said to myself this morning, I'm not going to get into a road debate.
Right.
Because,
no debate.
Yes, and I want to put it in the context.
Yes.
That because there's a situation where we are talking about who should have built a road and why the road should have been built.
Right.
The reality is governments have to do work. Development has to happen. And anyone who is focused on building a road and touting it as an achievement does not understand the role of government. And I just want to put that context on the table.
Right.
That governments are really in place to build societies, not build a road. And in reality, building a society means that, yes, you have to build roads, but the roads serve a purpose. And the roads serve a purpose in many ways. They facilitate business, they facilitate movement of people, they facilitate economic activity, and they even facilitate through the construction sector, which has a great multiplier effect. They facilitate economic growth. So I just want to put that context on the table. In terms of the plans, and I will leave these documents with you actually. There was an MOU between the government, the cabinet of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and the Tobago House of Assembly for the construction of a roadway, a dual carriage roadway that would have been paid for wholly and solely by the government of the Republic. And that was to facilitate, of course, the new construction of the airport terminal for the E.N.R. Robinson Airport Terminal, International Airport. So it was understood at the point in time that as we are building this new airport, there needs to be greater access. There needs to be development of the roadway. And of course, that should go through a process. So there were proposals, there were conceptual designs, and we were moving forward. Of course, things change, and that's fair. I tell people all the time, I learned long before I ever sat in any office, that policy is whatever our government decides to do or not to do. So if it is this government, this THA, this administration decided not to follow through, then that is on them. That's their policy. However, that policy has come at the opportunity cost of $70 million of the money that could have been spent otherwise in Tobago. So the administration, and if we were to take off the table the procurement method, if we were to take off the table who was selected to build, if you were to take off the table the ridiculous innuendos that the PNM probably went back in time and placed Mr. Hearn on the property 35 years ago, if you were to take that off the table, the fact is that the opportunity cost of the development of this road is $70 million to the people of Tobago, because the entire cost was going to be borne by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Could you imagine, Natalie, if the Prime Minister, we woke up this beautiful Monday morning, and the Prime Minister said, you know what, there's traffic going into Chagaramas, we're going to have carnival again soon, or we're going to have anything soon, we're going to build a causeway across the water. That's not how governments work. And I'm seeing where in the efforts to defend themselves, I'm hearing some frightening things, and things that I think people in Tobago should be really frightened, worried, and concerned about. Because I heard the secretary when he went live, and kudos to him for trying to be transparent, or what he terms to be transparency, that they are now advancing negotiations with some people for the road to pass. And I'm saying, I mean, we have built roads. I've built roads, and during my tenure, the PNM has built roads during our tenure, and I know that the design has to be done. That's one, but also that survey needs to be done. We need to ensure that it's free of encumbrances.
Right.
So any negotiation that has to be done should have been done long before the road even started.
Right.
So to come out to the people, as the chief secretary did, and say, well, the road will be done in a month, and then, and again, the determination is okay. Building the road is fine, but it's not about building the road. It's about developing a society. And what message are we sending when the EMA had to file an injunction? And of course, the complaint was filed not by the PNM, it was filed by the conservator of forests, our senior public servant in the Tobago House of Assembly, who is no supporter of the PNM as far as I am aware, and that's okay. And so an EMA injunction was filed so that they have to do the right things.
Right.
And then now we have a private citizen who has no brief for the PNM either. And he had to file an injunction because he woke up, I think he said Mother's Day, and to find that people are ready to bulldoze his place.
Right, but let's just back up a bit, because you mentioned the EMA, and of course they have passed that because they now have
clearance.
Yes, of course. And in terms in that particular family or individual who is claiming rights, from what is in the public domain, is that the government or via THA would have acquired the estate in 2009.
Yes, and I love that you brought that up, because, and I really want to advance the conversation, because in the perfect world, Natalie, our government has plans, the government will have enough money to do it, and there will be no encumbrances, there will be no challenges. We don't live in a perfect world. And there will be challenges day in, day out. When we were dealing with Study Park, transforming Study Park from a public entity operating in public sector to a publicly owned company, we had challenges, but it wasn't that we were just going to send out people or fire or just try to deal with things in a haphazard way. It's almost reminiscent. I did American history in school, so you have to permit me. It reminds me of the westward expansion when they were building the railways, and it's like, I want this land for the railway, and whoever is there, if you don't give us the land by ease, we're taking it by force. And that's just not the way things are done.
But is it fair to make that comparison? Because, I mean, we're looking at the rights of an individual, and of course I don't want us, because we are not the law or lawyers, etc., to interpret it. But in terms of someone having rights, if it is I don't have rights to the land and it's owned by another entity, then that entity can do what they want at will. I mean, they may have courtesy and approach it a particular way.
So let me give you an example, Natalie. And you see, and as you rightfully said, we are not the court of law. The fact that the court of law granted an injunction, if the court of law felt that Mr. Hearn had absolutely no rights, it would have been thrown out. Many injunctions have been thrown out, because people have filed pre-action protocol letters all the time, and people have applied for relief, injunctive relief all the time, and sometimes it's granted, sometimes it's thrown out because the court has decided, you know what, you have no rights. And if the court felt that the gentleman had no rights, then injunctive relief would not have been granted.
So an injunctive relief was filed in that particular case?
That is what...
Or with town and country
planning? There was the private citizen filed for injunctive relief. Based on the fact that the EMA did grant approval, but approval on the conditions that all of the necessary approvals would be sought after and granted as well. So the court saw that this man had enough rights to pursue a case. So the fact that the court felt that, again, I'm no lawyer, I'm no judge, I don't know what your background is, but that's what the court decided, and so I'm not the one to contest the court. The lawyers will do that, and that's why we have the court of law. And could you imagine if we did not have the court of law, then someone who clearly has rights in the eyes of the court of law would have been denied his rights. When we built the connector road from Mount Mary to Smithfield, there were squatters who were regularized in that space. We actually had to adjust the layout of the road that we had in mind initially. We had to, and it meant that we had to make many adjustments, in additional costs. build up greater retaining walls and so on to accommodate the people who were regularized squatters there. So we could have said, well, this is really state land, you'll have to move. No, that's not how you deal with people. Again, we're about developing a society. Society is nothing without a people. And we can't be denying people of their rights. We can't be skirting and avoiding the law and even boldly saying that we don't have to adhere to the law. Because I look back at Mr. Hume's interview and he made a very valid and valuable point that if the government, the administration, the people in leadership are denying the law, are skirting the law, are breaking the law, what are you leaving for the ordinary citizens? What are you leaving for our children? So when you start seeing things going crazy in our schools, and there's no respect for teachers, there's no respect for the rule of law, and people are fighting and warring all the time, you understand because the leadership of the island is one that is almost promoting it. And as you mentioned, the fact that the Tobago House of Assembly is in ownership of the Friendship Estate, one of the PNM's legacies, and people tend to forget these things, is the acquisition of a very sizable land bank for the people of Tobago. I don't know if you remember Mr. Michael Melville, God rest his soul. Michael Melville, for those who may not remember, was killed at Pigeon Point in April of 2000. And he was killed trying to access his boat. And the Tobago House of Assembly, under the leadership of the PNM, acquired Pigeon Point for over $100 million. And we have acquired many other estates, the Adelphi Estate, Grimshaw Lands, Cove, and so on, all for the development of our people. And we have seen the value of that. So even now, as this current administration is proposing to build houses, even as they're proposing to build this road, all of that is being facilitated by the actions of our PNM administration long before they came into office, because there was a view that we have to have these lands because there is need for future development. So yes, we wanted to have a road built. Yes, a road should be built for access, to improve access to the airport, not because it's an emergency for Carnival, because that, to me, in my mind and my experience, is a foolish excuse, but that's up to the policy of the policymakers at present. If that's what they want to bring to the people, so let it be. But the fact is, they can even build a road now through the Friendship Estate because the PNM invested in Tobago in a tangible way, spent over $1 billion to acquire many of these estates. To be the THA is the hold of, I think, 40% of the land in Tobago, and this is outside of the main ridge, which is a larger holding than many other islands in the Caribbean. And again, that was the policy of a People's National Movement administration. I can't speak for the policy. Yes, we are saying that we want to be the greatest little island on the planet, but what are the actions that we are really taking to ensure that that is possible? What are the actions that we taking to develop our people? Because we really have to invest in people in a real and meaningful way. Right. And that's what I would love to see. And that's why I would love the conversation to go, that we're not about trying to use a sword. I've been in play, while I was Secretary of Infrastructure, we had to have some difficult negotiations with the heads of the union leaders, private citizens, and so on. And there was never a situation. I remember one time telling a businessman, a very renowned businessman, when he came to negotiate with his sword on the table, I said, listen, put that away. Right. Because you can't negotiate in good faith and your sword is on the table, or you pull out your gun and you're saying that you're big and you're bad. And to hear the Chief Secretary lambasting Mr. Hearn yesterday, talking about a horseman or ass man or whatever he said, it's sad, because it's not only the people who are there at the meeting are going to hear that. Our children are not going to hear that. And they're going to think that that is appropriate. That is how we speak about our people. Right. And that is not right. And I mean, the investments of the PNM administration over the years to ensure that young people have the opportunity. I know Mr. Augustine benefited from PNM policy. I benefited because... Well,
I think the majority of Tobago benefited. If it is PNM has been in charge for how many years?
So to try now to erase and say, well, the PNM do nothing, that's right. Absolute false. And I will say the same, at the end of the 4 years, I don't know that we can necessarily say that the people have done nothing. They may have done something. It may not have been extremely significant in the context, but something may have been done, whether it's good or bad, something would have been done. And I really want us to move to the place where we understand that it's not about building roads, It's not about building bridges, it's about building a society.
Right.
And as long as we understand that, and this administration, if faster they settle down and understand that their role is not to build and cut ribbons, but to develop people,
right.
then
But isn't that the politics of our nation? I mean, I hear what you're saying, and ideally, yes, and even, I mean, you mentioned in terms of building roads, building societies, but all of this play an integral part in building societies. And we have grown so accustomed to the politics of the nation, not just THA, but the national politics,
yes.
where the leaders have to train people to accept that that is what we do. So we pave your road a certain time, we build a road because as a people, the majority may just go on what they see. So it has evolved, be it good or bad. That is our tradition here, Mr. DeVries.
And I hear that, and I appreciate your point of view. But I just want to carry it again a bit further, and that's why I appreciate sometimes when I hear the Prime Minister speak, when I've heard past chief secretaries under the PNM speak, because it was always within a context. It's not about building the Point 14 highway. It's about ensuring that there's a great level of commerce going between the people of Point 14 and, of course, Port of Spain. When the road to Tobago, Valencia bypass, and so on, all of these things were built, the idea was that these roads are getting to somewhere. We want to build a new port in Tobago because we want to see the development of Northeast Tobago. So it's in a context. So saying that I spent $70 million to build a road, that's not the context, because that $70 million, recycling is now almost dead in Tobago.
Right.
It's going to cost $1 million approximately to run the recycling program annually. It means that the $70 million spent on this road, we could have run recycling in Tobago for the next 70 years.
And as you mentioned the cost again, you in explaining the PNM plans for that road, you mentioned it would have been paid by the central government, right? However, that is not the case. So I don't know if you want to shed some light, because I understand that they're using the design, build, finance method. I know a lot of other countries use that method, and we would have the pros and cons of it, right?
And Natalie, no problem with that.
Okay.
No problem with that, again, because, for example, the oil spill that is happening, the Chief Secretary was clear to say, the Prime Minister was clear to say, the cost of this extraordinary cost, the THA wants the money back. Whether it's 51 million, whether it's 50, it comes up to 20 million at the end. The THA would love that money because there are other things to do.
Right.
We have to buy medication for the hospital, pay our teachers, books in the bags of children, and so on. So the design build, the methodology is okay. And again, I'm taking off the table for now because I think Mr. Dennis has gone through that enough. Because the reality is the procurement is questionable at best. The cause for the rush is a moot point as far as I'm concerned. It's up to people to decide. So the design build method for me is not even a problem. It's okay to use that method because, I mean, the national debt of the United States is over $34 trillion. So it's okay to incur debt. That's what governments do in development. So that methodology for me is not the problem. The problem for me is, what are we really doing? So yes, you built the road, but is the road part of a bigger plan, or is it just to say that we built a road and to stand up on a platform and say, well, we built the road and the PNM never did anything like that? I have a document for you here, just some of the achievements, some of the things that the Division of Infrastructure alone did from 2011 to 2019. And it's still not an exhaustive list. It doesn't include the achievements of the URP and so on. And of course, many roads that were built under the PNM, but that's not what it's about. And the conversation is not that. For even, I'm seeing now the Division of Tourism is putting out these, I won't call it laughable, but they're playing semantics, because my background is in tourism.
Right, yes.
So I understand the difference between a visitor and somebody who's considered a stay over arrival. And the reality is, I remember going on my own fact-finding mission in 2015 to the Bahamas. And the Bahamas, from my studies, they have the highest spend per cruise passenger in the Caribbean. Over 75 US per day, and that's in 2015. The conversation shouldn't be about how many visitors, because obviously they are counting people who are on the ship who probably didn't even come off the ship. And again, semantics, if that's what you want to do, fine. That's your policy, fine. But what we really want to know is, how are we trying to extract value from these visitors? Even if you want to count them as 26,000 or 30,000, however you want to count it. what is this average spend? What are we doing to move the spend of this visitor from $5 to $15, and we hope by in the next 5 years, $25.
Right.
And those are the conversations that we need to have. When the Tobago Jazz Festival started in Plymouth, the Plymouth Jazz Festival, Tobago did not have any marquee tents. Nobody had any large stages. We didn't have lighting. Now we can boast about that because the P&M, again, policy was to develop the orange economy and to develop people, businesses, to facilitate the development of that. That's why the BDU was put in place. Now we have people with the capacity, and everybody wants to get into stage and lighting and sound.
Yes.
And even generators. I remember speaking to one of the guys who did infrastructure for the first Tobago Jazz, and he said we had to bring lots of generators from Trinidad. And by the time I did my last Tobago Jazz in 2016, when I worked at that division, the guy was saying, well, imagine we don't even have to bring up a single generator anymore because there's so much capacity on the island in terms of the generators, the tents, and the stage, and all of those things. But yet we have, and the same one for the construction sector. We invested heavily when the Claude Noel Highway was built, Sierra Brothers built it. But now we have capacity in Tobago because the P&M developed capacity in Tobago. People have the technical capacity and they have the mechanical capacity as well. Yet we have a situation where we are giving contracts to Trinidadians, okay, and they are bringing up all of the equipment, they are bringing up all of the technical persons as well to Tobago, when in fact we have already built up this capacity in Tobago. So what you're actually doing is you're no longer building a society, you're now destroying because you're taking away. The multiplier effect of tourism globally is about 3 to 1. It means that every tourist dollar spent is spent 3 times over. The construction sector is a similar thing. When we invest in construction, the multiplier effect, I think, is about 2.7 or something like that. It means that the dollar is spent over and over again, and we wonder why things are so difficult in Tobago. It's because we are allowing massive leakages out of the Tobago economy. Because when a contractor in Tobago is given a job, be it for 5 million, 10 million, or whatever the case might be, they have to hire people. Those people have to go in the grocery down the road, they have to buy books, they have to get engaged services, and the money is spent over and over. The same thing with Tobago Jazz. It's not just about how much we spend on the festival, it's how much the people who come here, they're spending because they're going to buy clothes, they're going to buy food, they want transport, accommodation, and that money is spent over and over again, building a society, building an economy, building our people. And that's not the conversation happening right now. And we need to move there.
And I hear you, and I think it's every politician's right or individual who strongly supports a party to look at what the others aren't doing or doing and compare it to when they were in power, because one can also propose that the PNM had their time, and all those you suggested and what you just disclosed, one may ask, why wasn't it done, or was it done, and what do we know about it? But before we continue, because I want to ask you, because I heard this also being discussed in the public domain, in terms of how governments do things, particularly this government, Trinidad and Tobago, be it central government, local government, THA, in terms of projects. So we're not talking about if it's right or wrong, because I also heard that argument, but the precedence is a lot of government projects are done or started, and the paperwork happens because of the bureaucracy comes in after, So if you can just talk about projects that would have been done under your terms, or while the PNM was in power, how many projects were done without getting that EMA clearance, at least the start with one?
And I hear that argument, and wherever it didn't happen, I'm very sure the EMA stepped in the same way. And so it's not for me to sit back here and bemoan from 2001 to 2021, where the PNM got CC approvals or whatever.
But in terms of, I want us to look at the process, because we understand that A should come before B, but because of how our governments and systems are set up, sometimes we start off projects and we know it may come in after. So we're talking about that process. In
genuine cases of emergency, I could get that, where there are major landslips, where we are under attack from coastal erosion and so on, where we have real serious challenges there. I get that sometimes you just have to act. When, and you see the difference, when the airport relocation project was happening, and of course, people were up in arms. There were consultations. People were quarreling. It was explosive at times. And even when we had to develop the land in Friendship, in Cove, and at Shervan, because we had to provide land for housing and even some houses for persons there. We did not touch a blade of grass, Natalie, until we got every single approval. And that was a dire situation. But we had progress, and that's why I said from the start that the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and the Environment was focused on finding a way to marry, finally, infrastructural development and environmental sustainability. Because for too long, and we've now gone back to that, for too long, the environment has suffered because of infrastructural development. We did not touch a blade of grass until we had EMA approvals for both Cove and Shervan, and Town and Country approval, and approval from TNTEC, and approvals from WASA. So we went through every rigor to ensure that it was done. When we rehabilitated the Study Park jetty, we approached it was argued, well, that's there now, there's a grandfather clause and everything for the jetty. But the reality is we still had to go to the EMA and get a CEC. And there was a non-objection letter from the EMA, but we still went through the process to get approval. And now you see, and again, it's great because I saw photos where Study Park Enterprise Limited is at a trade show in Ghana. And because of the work of the administration when I was there to transform Study Park to Spell, we now could say, well, Ghana, we have this great operation in Tobago. We refurbish these plants. We could produce this aggregate of high quality, and we could send it to you in Ghana. So the fact that there's testament and great eloquent testimony to the work that the PNM has done. And I keep saying that it doesn't matter, Natalie, if we chose to do design build or not. If there was a genuine emergency, I could get it. If it is someone's home was on the verge of collapse, I could get it. If it is the drainage, our drainage systems are dated in Tobago, and if it is the drainage system is causing homes to be undermined, I get it. If it is rivers are bursting their banks and eroding people's homes, threatening people's homes, I get it. But you can't tell me that traffic for Carnival is a reason. And the fact is that carnivals have come and gone, and the roads haven't been completed, and people have come and gone the same way. So it's not, if it could continue without it, then it's not a genuine emergency. And that's why I made the point of where are we going? How are we building our people? And infrastructure facilities development, I get that.
Right.
So we have to construct, we have to build drains, we have to build roads, we have to pave or repave roads. We have to do those things. How efficient you are doing it, that's another question. How transparent you are while you do it, that's a different story. But those things have to happen. So for me, again, I have countless examples that I can show where we have followed the letter of the law. And wherever it may have been in the past where that was not the case, the EMA certainly stepped in. I can remember even the Charlottesville mini mall was in abeyance for a long time, and part of it was the EMA process. Right. And of course, there was one shop owner there who was now claimed the space, although he was squatting on state land. He claimed that space. He had rights. The court gave him injunctive relief, and then went beyond that to grant him ownership of a piece of property. He has even encroached beyond the property, and that's up to the state and Town and Country to deal with that.
Right.
But again, whenever the THA, whoever is in office, was there, and that's why we have these control mechanisms in place. That's why the EMA stopped the Brian Lara Academy at one point in time, because it's not about you or the government and you can do what you want. Yes, you can do it. The EMA is not there to stop development, and I've heard the CEOs, the managing director say that. They are not there to stop development. They are there to ensure that you go along certain lines. Sandals is opening in St. Vincent. Over 500 Vincentians are going to be employed. By January, over 900 Vincentians will be employed. The agricultural sector is going to get booming. The fishing sector will get booming because they have to supply sandals. Right. But we chased sandals away even before the CEC was completed in Tobago. And sometimes I look at it now that we have 10 on, 10 off again. Again, a backward step. We're giving young people 10 on, 10 off, when in fact, we could have been had those young people constructing the hotel, and by now, the hotel may have, just like St. Vincent, be ready to start operation, because Sanders only moved to St. Vincent after the deal with Tobago fell through. We could have been the one opening a brand new resort. We could have been attracting new airlift or greater airlift to Tobago, because we spend a lot of money now on marketing arrangements with the airlines. But every airline wants the same thing. They want the front of the plane full. They want business class and first class filled. Business class and first class passengers are not going to stay in an Airbnb.
Right.
They want to stay in a 5-star resort, and that's the reality. So we want to have a mix of attractions. We also want to have a mix of the accommodation types as well. And that's where standards would have come into play. And the two properties would have been done well. And just like with the road through Friendship, if ever the developers were in breach of the CEC, the EMA would have stepped in. Fishermen and Friends of the Sea in Tobago took the EMA all the way to the Privy Council.
Right.
And the EMA's ruling, their methodology was upheld because they followed the letter of their law. If something says that we reply in 10 days, they reply in 10 days. If it says that the step goes through a process of 25 days from the data submission, they go through that process because they understand the reason for the law. So the EMA does not curry favor anybody. And it's not about, well, we have oversight or is environment is a fixed schedule issue. No.
Right.
No, and we can't go down that road, because it then means that we would end up with an extremely tyrannical government at some point in time. And again, the westward expansion, the season, and dealing with people as they want on a whim. And we have agencies at the EMA to protect people, to protect Trinbagonians, to protect Tobagonians. And I'm happy that they stepped in when they did. And again, not to stop development, but to ensure that it's in line with the regulations, the rules, and the rule of law.
Right. And I'll just let you pause right there because we are taking a break, viewers. We'll be right back, so stay tuned.
Let's go. A brand new morning, rise up to a brand new dawning.
Welcome back, viewers. You are looking at GMT via Tobago Updates, and we are coming to you live from Port Mall, downtown Scarborough this morning. I don't know how your morning is going, but I do trust it's going well. And if it started off a bit rocky, don't worry. You have a lot of hours to settle in and get it right. We continue our conversation with former Secretary of the Division of Infrastructure, Mr. Kwesi Vignes, and we have been speaking a lot about roads. And I want us to shift gear a little bit and just talk about the overall goal, you think, or direction that the division should be heading. You're no longer there, but of course you are Tobagonian and you have the experience. You would know what you would like to see for Tobago. So where do you think the division should be heading at this point in time?
And I appreciate that question, Natalie, because it's going to be the same thing I've been saying. It's about facilitating development.
Right.
And you know, I remember actually the advisor now in the division, he was one of the people that shared to me that we love speaking about the achievement of building a road, when in fact, any government, the road infrastructure should be at the back. It's facilitating infrastructure, because we want to develop the society, we want to develop the economy. So I think the division now should be really focusing on people and touching people in the right way. The division should also focus on transparency. We spent a lot of time ensuring that there was a lot of transparency there. At the division, we followed the procurement. There was central procurement. I'm hearing now that that's not the case. Again, that's the policy of the current administration. And I was far removed from the procurement process. I had no interest. I had no person that I personally hired managing the procurement unit. All of that came from another place, because I wanted at all times to be separate from the procurement process. Now we are seeing where the contractors are writing directly to the secretary and speaking about getting works done, as in the case of Little Tobago Jetty and the Buku Road paving. And those are things that we did not do in my time. And just to touch quickly on the airport, for example, because I heard that the secretary mentioned that nobody came to him about the airport, and I find that's a kind of Lord of the Flies approach. And we should seek a lot more collaboration. Here I have, again, besides the MOU for the road development, there's an airport oversight committee that the Tobago House of Assembly, not even at the level of the Secretary of Infrastructure, at the level of the Office of the Chief Secretary, the Chief Administrator, appointed 2 persons to sit on the oversight committee. And we did have an engineer as well sitting in with them. So 3 persons were working so that there was a space where there could be constant communication and work together on the airport project. Because building an airport is not like building a house or even building a road or a drain. Airports have to meet international standards, the International Civil Aviation Authority standards, whatever is the FAA, whatever standards that we're looking at. So it's not to say that, well, the THA has to check out the drainage and so on, which is the main purpose of the local agency.
Right.
But they have great standards in terms of the tarmac, in terms of the distances, the measurements that they have to adhere to. And at all times, we want to have a working relationship with central government who is undertaking the project. So that there are things, for example, if the policy in Tobago is that, you know what, we really want to move towards green energy.
Right.
Then there should be a conversation, an active conversation at the level of the secretary with the minister, the line minister, saying, listen, we want to ensure that you incorporate green technology, green energy into the airport. And those are the conversations we need to have. Because, Natalie, just a reminder, the overall plan was, hey, Tobago is beautiful on its own. Tobago is the capital of paradise. We need to generate revenue from the tourism sector. Tourism did its best under the People's National Movement. Actually, I remember when I did my undergraduate project, I sat with Mr. Neil Wilson, God rest his soul, and he was making the point that when he got into office, Tobago tourism sector, the industry itself, still had an on and off season. Hotels still closed for part of the year.
Right.
We now have a year-round situation. Even the fast ferry is one initiative from the Tobago House of Assembly going to the government at the time in 2005 and saying, hey, let's move towards this, which brought on a boom and a transition in domestic tourism.
Right.
The cruise ships, the berth that they're using now, at the time was a world record concrete pour to expand and extend the jetty at the Scarborough Port, again under the PNM government in collaboration with the central government at the time to facilitate the very cruise ships that we're getting now. Because before they might have had to stay further out and tender people in, we don't have that situation anymore. So, you see, first working in harmony, collaborating, and still having your say, still saying, you know what, I hear that's your policy, our policy, however, we want to focus in this area and that area. The plan to do a new airport with hotel construction. I mean, I was working in St. Vincent when the airport was starting to be built in 2009.
Right.
And at the time, there were no hotel projects on the horizon. Now they have sandals. And people don't understand in St. Lucia, the demand per 1,000 pounds of melon, tomatoes, cucumbers, and so on. The Sandals has something called the Adopter Farmer Program, where they actually, because with Sandals, they don't pay, generally hotels don't pay farmers on a monthly basis or per purchase. I want to have a particular quantity at a specified quality.
Right.
And you have to be able to withstand that because financially you can be sustainable as well. So Sandals has what they call the Adopter Farmer Program, where they build farmers in Jamaica, in Grenada, in St. Lucia, in Barbados, to ensure that they can provide, because they don't want to have to bring in anything that's double and triple handling.
Yeah.
They want to get fresh produce right here.
Right.
So even if we want to, and that's why at the time, once we knew Sandals was coming, at the time we started to develop a lot of agricultural access roads so that we could open up some farmlands. And there's a plan to develop farms just like we were developing housing areas. Right.
At this time, Mr. Devines, I would have to ask you to pause because we have to wrap up this time that we are spending here this morning. And of course, you know, I am sure we can accommodate a return interview if that is your desire. At this time, viewers, we are going to a break, and we want to thank Mr. Devines for spending time and sharing his perspective with us as well, and sharing information that he would have at his hand as a former secretary in the Division of Infrastructure as well. Coming on the next side of the break is ACP Collis Hazel, and we will be talking about security in Tobago. So stay tuned, viewers. We'll be right back.